Welcome to the Art of Procurement podcast with your host, Philip Eidson. Here, thought leaders share the trends, strategies, and tactics that you can use to elevate the role of procurement and your career.
Hi there, everybody, and welcome to episode 90 of the Art of Procurement. And I know that I repeat this often, but thank you so much for tuning in, for the emails and for the LinkedIn messages that I receive. You know, those messages are really inspiring to me, really helps me dedicate the time necessary to pull together each Art of Procurement show. And today we're going to cover a topic that I haven't really talked about before, and that's contract lifecycle management. And my guest is Samir Bodas, the co-founder and CEO of Icertis. So Samia began his career at McKinsey before joining Microsoft, where he rose through a number of leadership positions. He then became the CEO of IT services firm Disha Technologies and led Disha through its acquisition by Aztecsoft, and then as president and CEO of Aztecsoft, their acquisition by Mindtree. So Samia co-founded Icertis, which is a cloud-based contract management software company, back in 2009. I think things are going well so far for Icertis, and they were actually recently named a top 50 private cloud company to work for. And so I've never actually worked for a company that I think has done a good job of using technology to do the work to catalog, to understand the depth and breadth of their supplier contracts, but also use technology to integrate into the contracting process. So I took the opportunity of speaking with Samir to explore what contract lifecycle management software actually does, what are the keys to its success, and how does Samir predict that the technology is going to evolve? So, with that in mind, let's roll the tape on my conversation. Hi there, and welcome to another episode of The Art of Procurement. And my guest today is Samir Bodas. Samir is the CEO of Icertis. So Samir, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So I have to ask you about this before we go into the topic of conversation. When I was looking at your bio, you talked a lot about golf, kind of in the way that I talk about football or soccer. So why golf?
Because it takes a long time to finish a round, and that gives you an excuse to do something other than chores at home.
Right.
No, but I think the other thing is, to a large extent, I took up golf when I was transitioning out of my previous company, which we sold in 2008. Mm-hmm. And it is a great sport to put on your thinking hat. Yeah. And the genesis of Icertis is really, I wouldn't say it's on a golf course, but it's definitely a sport that helped me think and focus and get out into fresh air and think of what I'll do next. And it definitely helped. And here we are, 7 years later. I took up golf in 2008, 2009. So 7 years later, we have a company that is 150 employees strong, and we have some of the best customers in the world, knock on wood, and have $21 million in funding. So I'm glad I took up golf.
Well, I'm actually going to go into some details about what is contract lifecycle management and what you do at Icertis. But first of all, why was that an area that, when you were coming off, 2007, 2008, you said, I'm sure you had a number of different options of which direction to go in. What was it about procurement and contracts specifically that made you think, that's where I want to build a company around?
No, very good question. I think very few people, if any, wake up in the morning and go, Eureka, I'm going to build a contract management company. And even with us, it was a journey with my co-founder Monish Darda and myself. He was exiting his company that they sold in 2008, and as was I. And we sold our company in 2008 together and said we wanted to do something together in the startup area as our next endeavor. So we thought of how do we go about what area, what product, etc. to choose. And to some extent, you have to go into this if you don't have an idea already with some structure, in some sort of a structured fashion. Mm-hmm. And one of the first principles that we have always believed in, Monish and I, is to build a large, successful software company. We believe that you have to either create a wave or ride a wave.
Yeah.
There's technology wave. Creating a technology wave is way above our pay grade.
Right.
Jobs, Zuckerberg and Gates and others. So we had to sort of think about what wave will we ride. And to some extent, being in Seattle, I was lucky that two of the four public cloud vendors in the world are based in Seattle, Amazon and Microsoft, with Azure and Amazon with AWS. And we, even then, 7-10 years ago, we saw this cloud wave coming given how much investment was happening in the cloud in the Seattle area. And just looking at the investment and talking to folks locally here in Seattle, we said, wow, this is going to be a big wave.
Yeah.
And we should do something in the cloud. And this is a wave that is early enough where we can have a first mover advantage, and it will probably be very large, and you'll probably get a small percentage of any pie, and the larger pie, the more absolute the value that you can create for yourself. The next few things, sort of sequences, were sort of us figuring out what we do in the cloud. We said we'll focus on the enterprise. We said we will build a company in a space, in a software space in the enterprise, where the software will necessarily move to the cloud.
Yeah.
Where it just doesn't make sense for that software to sit in a data center in some bunker. And we came up with ERP surround software as an area that we think all of that will move to the cloud. ERP surround software, the way we defined it, is any enterprise software that is either touched by a vendor or a customer, consumer, or a partner, access from outside the enterprise firewall. So this software already has some security surface that is exposed outside the firewall, and the demand for this software is usually spotty, whether it's time of day, time of the year, etc. And that's when serendipity hit. Microsoft was looking for a contract management system at that time, and since we know senior folks at Microsoft, especially in the legal department, they sort of said, hey, we can't find a great contract management solution, and they gave their reasons why. And since you're thinking of building an ERP surround ISV or a startup, why don't you think of building a contract management solution? Just do it in the cloud, which is our cloud, which is Azure. Really, that's we said, wow, that's a great idea. It fits right in. We built it, they licensed it, and off we went. Great.
Well, having that, building it for a company with, such as Microsoft, then gives you, well, I guess one is such a large company to be partnering with, but it gives you instant credibility then when you're going out further in the market.
That's right. And not only that, it's several aspects of it, right? Because if Microsoft is your first customer, you have to build a solution that is super enterprise class, right? It's used across the world by tens of thousands of people, etc. Then two, their business processes in the contracting space are pretty complex. So you have to build a solution that is sort of complex and can handle all sorts of things that a company like Microsoft does with contracting, and it's in multiple languages, et cetera. So really, as I said, good serendipity that it was Microsoft, good serendipity that we built something that they liked, and definitely that they licensed it as our first customer.
Well, today what I'd like to do, and listeners, long-time listeners of the Art of Procurement will know that while I've touched a lot of different spaces and areas in procurement, I've never really touched on contracting and contract management. So I thought today would be a really good opportunity to talk some of the basics of contract management and contract lifecycle management, and then some of the best practices. How can you actually look at implementing solutions like this into your organizations, and what are some of the key questions, some of the critical success factors? With that in mind, my first question is really a basic one. What is contract lifecycle management? What do you think of as CLM?
Yeah. So the way to think about contract lifecycle management, sort of top down from the CXO suite, if I may, is a system that helps you manage all your contracts in the enterprise.
Yeah.
Which is buy-side contracts, that is germane to our conversation today. There's also sell-side contracts, which are all your licenses, product, warranty, maintenance contracts, and your corporate contracts, which are non-disclosure agreements, MOUs, employment agreements, et cetera. So contract lifecycle management helps you manage all those contracts from clauses, which are essentially the fundamental building blocks of any contract, to templates, to assembling drafts, to the workflows for approvals, to managing the negotiation, executing the contract, and then administering the contract post-execution to make sure that whatever the vendor's commitments are, be it commercial or non-commercial, like certifications or insurance limits, or they might say to do something around innovation. All of that is followed by the vendor. So it's really this way of sort of enshrining what your commercial or what your relationship is with the vendor on a document, and ensuring that both parties adhere to that those terms and conditions and get the most out of it for you, as well as make sure that the vendor does what they're supposed to do.
And so is it something that's more of a data repository, or does it have workflow built into it that allows you to be more efficient in managing the creation and the execution of these contracts?
Yeah, it's all the above. It's really sort of on one axis, it is governance, risk, and compliance of the contract, right? Making sure you don't take on more risk than you should, making sure the enterprise or the procurement professionals in the enterprise are complying with your policies regarding procuring things, as well as having the right governance structure so that your vendors, as well as your procurement professionals, do the right thing according to what you set them out, or whatever your policies are. So at one extent it is that. The other extent, on the other side, it is really making sure that commercially you get the best out of the counterparty, out of the vendors that you have. And what that means is make sure you get the right discounts, make sure there's aggregations of spend across the world, make sure that whatever the vendor sort of discussed and committed to and negotiated in round one, sort of when round two comes along, all of that data and information is available so that you have a more intelligent and more insightful conversation, etc. So it's not only just the repository and the workflow, it is way beyond that with respect to analytics, with respect to reporting, with respect to alerts, with respect to integrations with your internal and external systems, and making yourself and your procurement professional much more efficient with respect to how you transact business with vendors.
So what kind of challenges, like when somebody comes to you, when a prospect comes to you, what are they trying to solve when they're looking at a CLM system?
Yeah, it could be a host of things, and focusing just on the buy side, it could be a host of things. First, it could be, as you can imagine, with procurement professionals, it's cost.
Yeah.
Right? How can I make sure I implement a system that will help me reduce my procurement costs? And that can be done by quite a few things. I mentioned earlier about aggregation of spend and application of discounts, etc. But it could be self-service. How do I enable folks in the organization to procure, to requisition, to source whatever they need by themselves, and reduce the overhead of the procurement organization but at the same time put the guardrails so that the individual doesn't shoot themselves in the foot or hurt the organization. So what we have found is that 80% of procurement is pretty standard.
Yeah.
And can be automated by a system like ours, and which can monitor and make sure that you enable self-service without taking on additional risk. So that's the second thing, right? How do I enable self-service? And the third sort of reason why folks might come to us is because they have had some sort of a compliance issue, or usually there can be a trigger. It could be an audit committee flagging it, a contract compliance and an issue. It could be something which went wrong with the vendor. It could be sort of just regulatory issues that you might have. So it is a bunch of things that why a customer would come to us and explore a partnership. But it's really something which is critical, with something very important and something very immediate when they come talk to us.
And would a CRM, is it a standalone system? And I'm asking because, I'm familiar with kind of the benefits, having worked a little bit with CRMs, but I think I've never seen them fully executed and implemented probably like they're able to, based on what their capabilities are, which is probably why I'm asking a couple of basic questions. So I'm wondering is it a standalone tool, or is it feeding into other procurement tools you may have? You talked about enabling self-service, so whether it goes into catalogs or whether it can filter into your sourcing platform or your procure-to-pay platform. Can you integrate a CRM into all of that, or is it a standalone tool?
Yeah, that's a great question, and really the contract management system has to integrate with a host of systems that you have with you across geographies and across divisions. So we integrate with sourcing systems, and there are a host of those systems. We integrate with requisition systems. We integrate with purchase order systems. We integrate with ERP systems. We integrate with your compliance systems. We integrate with the Active Directory systems. So the contract management system is really the backbone of whatever you're doing with your vendor, or for that matter with your customer, and integration is super critical. Now the question is, which is always a question: should it be a standalone system that integrates with other systems, or should it be part of a module in a suite, which is pre-integrated, and the direction sort of the world is going is, and this is because of the cloud, because we call cloud sort of integration central. It is so easy to integrate with other services and other products in the cloud, because that's how the cloud is designed. The direction the market is going is buy the best of breed solution in the market and integrate it with other best of breed solutions, because in most cases you will find that to build a suite of whatever number of modules you might have, it is very hard for these vendors to build the best in class modules for the suite. The only best in class suite that I know in the world is Microsoft Office.
Right.
And that's because Microsoft Office is a $30 billion business, and they can invest lots of money to make each of those products or modules, whether it's Word or Excel or PowerPoint, etc., the best of breed solution. But as you get to companies that are $1 billion or $100 million or even smaller, building a suite of multiple modules is probably shortchanging some modules, or maybe all of them. And for customers, that's probably too risky or not the right solution. The right way to do it, and that is where the world is going, get the best of breed, deep modules that will solve a contract management problem, or your sourcing problem, or your purchase order problem, and then integrate it where the contract management system provides the right terms and conditions that are in the contract in the right system at the right time. And that's where this world is headed.
So when you start thinking that, I want to take my contracts out of Outlook and I want to take them out of people's desk drawers and SharePoint sites and the like, and thinking about coordinating it with a CLM tool, what are some of the considerations that you should take into account when figuring out what it is that you actually need, what you should be looking for?
Yeah, so we get asked this all the time because most enterprises, so we work with essentially the Global 5,000, they have some sort of a contract management system in-house. And it could be the filing cabinet, which is a contract management system at the very basic level. Or it could be a custom app that is falling apart, or it could be a horizontal solution like SharePoint, or some document management system that houses their contracts with some basic alerts, etc. And the question is, if we were to go to a best-in-class solution like Icertis contract management platform, how do I migrate? How do I migrate my existing contracts, my workflows, etc., etc.? And we have done this with customers who have got hundreds of contracts in their repository, as you can imagine. We work with some of the largest companies in the world. And what we have found is usually an 80-20 rule applies. Of the 100,000 contracts that you might have in the repository, probably 20% of them are either valid or current or are used on a regular basis. The other 80% are perhaps not that interesting. So you start with that, right? Then of those 20% or 20,000 that are there, how many are already in some sort of a repository, either a PDF with some metadata or PDF with no metadata, but at least they're scanned and they're in some store. And usually that's a high percentage in Global 5,000. I don't think it's 100%, but maybe 80% of those are already there. Yeah. And once you have so you take that sort of 16,000 odd contracts, and we have OCR tools, we have partners like Cognizant, Duff & Phelps, Ernst & Young, Pricewaterhouse, etc., who can help you migrate those contracts into our system using our OCR tool, using some manual checks, et cetera, and we bring all of that in with the metadata. The other 4,000 that perhaps are not there, you can really, it's really manual work. You can deploy people to scan through that. So once you have these contracts sort of that are already digitized in your system, the other 80,000, the way we manage it is we actually bring them in at least with respect to the names of the contract into our system. Yeah. And then whenever somebody is searching for those contracts, there is a process that is inbuilt in our system where we can manually go and look for that contract and upload it, extract the metadata. So it's sort of on-demand upload for the contracts that you don't use very often whenever you need them.
When you're thinking of pulling something together like this, and you mentioned at the beginning that it's also for sell-side contracts, HR contracts, how do you coordinate everybody's different requirements? Because I've seen situations where a company has needed a contract system for the buy side, and they've gone and bought their own, and the sell side have gone and bought their own, and they're two completely different things. And a year down the line, they think, hey, maybe we should have talked to each other. How do you coordinate that?
No, I think contract management, you hit the nail on the head, is a strange business process. And the reason it's a strange business process is because it touches so many groups in a company, right? It touches legal, it touches finance, it touches compliance, it touches procurement, it touches sales. And if you enable NDAs to be executed by a broader set of people than that, then marketing and others who do NDAs would get involved. So to gather requirements from all these different disparate groups is in itself very hard.
Right.
So that's what led to folks saying, okay, then let's take a siloed approach, right? Let's eliminate some of these groups and let's do a procurement contract management system. So at least it is something we can get our arms around, or sales, or NDAs, or what have you. And that is something we saw very early on. And the epiphany we had is, since it is so hard to capture these requirements, and even more importantly, these requirements seem to change over a period of time, because your buying pattern changes, your policies change, or your compliance or regulatory requirements change, or what have you. What is very important is to build a system that is extremely configurable. Mm-hmm. What that means is that it doesn't matter what your business process is, this system, without touching a line of code, should be able to be configured very quickly to your needs. And then more importantly, as your needs evolve, change, for whatever reason, somebody in the business, or somebody very simply, without again touching a line of code, should be able to keep adapting the system, or the system adapts to your changing needs.
Today's episode of The Art of Procurement is brought to you by Zycus Horizon 2016. And Horizon is an annual procurement conference hosted by Zycus. Zycus is a leading provider of a complete suite of source-to-pay procurement performance solutions, and their 2016 Horizon event is a 3-day get-together from October the 23rd to October the 25th. At the event, procurement executives learn, share, network, and unwind, all within the company of their peers at the Ritz-Carlton in Dove Mountain, Arizona. And I'm really excited that the Art of Procurement is the media partner for the event, and I'll actually be hosting and leading 2 different sessions. First of all, a panel discussion with a number of thought leaders who will consider innovation, and are we as a profession innovating fast enough? And then I'll present a breakout session that asks the question, how can we save procurement from extinction? I'm really looking forward to the event, and I hope to see you there. For more information, visit artofprocurement.com/horizon. So once you have the tool in place, the system in place, how do you ensure compliance? And I ask that from a personal experience again of, you have these systems that are put in place, and as a buyer you think, this is just too much upfront work. I've got far more important things in my mind to spend my time rather than uploading and to integrating contracts into tools. And it can be left dormant, and then, you kind of have the same problem when you started. So how's the best companies that you've worked with ensure that there's compliance across the organization in using the system once it's in place?
Yeah, no, that's always a challenge. If the tool doesn't do something, or if the tool is taxing on the end customer, mm-hmm. then the end customer will try to reduce that tax by doing something outside the system, and that happens with any. And the way to enforce that is really from the top, not with a stick, but by making sure that any reports that you get that you want about your procurement, you demand that those reports come from within the system, not outside the system. Mm-hmm. Whether it is sort of vendor performance, whether it is what contracts are in flight, whether it is how assembling a simple contract, and reporting on how many contracts were assembled. If you enforce from the top that do not send me any reports in email, I will log into the system and look at the reports or whatever data I need. I think it flows all the way down that, hey, if it's not in the system, the contract really doesn't exist for the CPO, right. And that's not a good thing.
Right.
That's one. The second thing that is very important, which is sort of on the enforcement or oversight side, the second thing which is very important that we found is let the contract management system be part of the day-to-day system that the end user uses.
So when you look out to the future then and think about, so I'm sure that you have product roadmaps obviously that go out to evolve your offering, the evolving nature of machine learning, cognitive technologies, I imagine would play into that. I was interested to know what's next for CLM tools and CLM platforms, and will they be impacted? Will their capabilities be impacted by some of these technologies that are really evolving pretty quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are several. The way we do our development is in three phases. One is sort of what is immediately needed that will be shipped in the next 6 weeks. Second is what do we need in the system on the platform in the next 6 months. And the third is what we call moonshots. What R&D can we invest in for fundamentally changing how an enterprise sort of uses the contract management system. And in that moonshot area, there's several things that we are doing. One is blockchain technology.
Okay.
Right? Can blockchain and how can blockchain be used for executing contracts and ensuring sort of inter-party contractual compliance without overhead from a third party?
Yeah.
And that's one area I think which is going to evolve substantially. The other is applying technologies like Watson, right, which are deep analytics, machine learning, natural language processing, etc. Can you apply those technologies to enhance the insight that you can have from where there are inefficiencies in your contracts or your body of contracts, more importantly? That's where we are looking at that. And the third area that we are looking at are bots, right? I think you're seeing bots almost everywhere. Can bots help relieve some level of first order negotiation, where you know what your standard fallback terms are, you know what you're willing to give on. Can a bot actually, whether it's an email bot or or some other bot, look at the first red line from the counterparty, make those first suggestions from your fallbacks automatically?
Interesting. So they're basically taking those two contracts and knocking out everything which is kind of no-brainers within the constraints that you give it, and then presenting, here are the 4 issues you really need to negotiate on. Exactly right.
And I think that's the place where all this technology is going to go, and it's one reason why we are so excited about contract management, because nobody has thought of contracts. Let me back up. Everybody has thought of contracts as a piece of document that enshrines a commercial relationship.
Yeah.
Nobody has really thought of this document as an asset, as a live document that can be mined, that can be thought of substantially, not only after it is signed, but after, while the contract is in flight or being administered. And how do you bring this body of contracts to life so that you're a much better enterprise with respect to what you buy, what you sell, or any of your corporate contracts.
I just have a final question, which may be something that we've already covered today, but it's, I like to finish on an action that the listeners can take. And so my question really was, if you have implemented or you're considering implementing a CLM system, what's really the one single thing that has the greatest impact on its success, how it's adopted, how it's used, and the compliance that you have with the tool?
Yeah, the only thing that matters is adoption.
Okay.
So what can you do to increase the adoption of the system? Make it very easy to use. Make sure that the end user doesn't have to change context while doing contracting from their core work. Make sure that you present the contract management system as a value add within the environment that the end user is working in. And then make sure that at the end of the day, you go back to the end user to show them the value through reports and analytics and make their lives easier. Really, this whole contract management business is all about adoption and ease of use, nothing else.
So I was just going to wrap up and ask if listeners would like to learn a little bit more, if they want to continue the conversation, what's the best way for them to contact you or contact iCertis? Where can they find you?
So our website is www.icertis.com. That is ICERT like Tom, IS. icertis.com, or you could send us a mail at info@icertis.com. I think either of those are great ways to get in touch with us, and I will commit that we will come back to you within 24 business hours.
Great.
After you sort of send us a mail. That's definitely something that we take very seriously, mails that come into info@icertis.com.
Great. Well, what I'll do is I'll actually link up to those on the show notes for today's episode so that nobody has to worry about trying to scribble them down while they're driving their car. Those are going to be at artofprocurement.com/CLM. That's artofprocurement.com/CLM. So I'll include contact details. I'll also include some notes and some takeaways that I've taken from our discussion. So, Samia, finally, I just want to thank you very much again for taking the time to speak to me and for sharing your insights on the contract management and the CLM space.
My pleasure, Philip. Thank you so much for making the time. It was definitely an insightful conversation, more importantly, a fun conversation. Great. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Samir. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Art of Procurement. To find an archive of all past episodes, you can go to artofprocurement.com/episodes. And to ensure you never miss another show, go to artofprocurement.com/subscribe.